Keep in mind, this is a conversation about minors. This person did all of this at 22, they just said. So you're an adult. I just don't really know if this person's really applicable to the conversation. All right, let's see. I also really love when Jubilee does this because it always feels like they like go to a college campus, ask a few people if they want to be in videos, for the usually the left wing side of the argument, and then when it's time to go look for right wingers, they just go and call content creators, media trained personalities, people who their job is to have these disagreements, not it's a thing that they care about while they're getting their degree. It's always very interesting to me. But anyway, let's
raise your hand if you feel attacked by the opposite side.
Why is there a gecko? That's fun. Jesus.
Step forward if you agree with the prompt. Gender-related treatment should be banned for minors. I repeat, gender-related treatment should be banned for minors.
Gender-related. Okay, so let's. Okay, well, let's see what they think. Gender.
Medical transition is no place for a child. I transition as an
Detransitioning means stopping or reversing gender transition, which can include medical treatment or changes to appearance or both. In appearance or both. Associated Press.
And I have medical complications. I have mental health issues. Child cannot consent to a medical transition because kids want to eat ice cream every day. It doesn't mean that they should.
I kind of agree with.
Is transitioning the same thing as ice cream? Already I'm not really a fan of this argumentation because I mean, it's treating transition as if it's candy, as if it's something that inherently is irresponsible to participate in. Because obviously, you know, when people draw the comparison of ice cream, of candy, and stuff like that, I think Libs of TikTok does this. What you are inevitably drawing the similarity to isn't to transitioning, isn't to, you're drawing this comparison in a incredibly ignorant and dishonest way. What people go through in terms of their their possible gender dysphoria, their dissatisfaction with their gender roles, with their gender what's the word I'm looking for, presentation, whatever, is not the same as I want ice cream because it's sweet tasting, because I like ice cream. These things are so wildly different. And also, it also kind of belies a certain I think narrative which kind of I think should be maybe a little bit more normalized, in the sense that if you want to transition, if it's something you want, you should be able to do that. The same way, if you want ice cream, you should be able to eat that, buy it, whatever. But when we talk about minors, we're not even talking about transitioning. We're not even talking about a lot of the medical and a lot of the surgery aspect of it. For minors, the gender-related treatment refers to hormone blockers and hormone therapy at the most, and at the absolute least, it's socially transitioning, which is to say, maybe, when they choose a different identity, you affirm that identity and move forward with that new identity. They might reverse back, they might not, who knows? But the gender-related treatment that we give kids isn't surgery. Kids don't get gender-affirming surgeries. Certainly not a majority, certainly not even a plurality. I would be shocked to find any number that's not, in the like single digits, double digits, maybe. And even that I'd be shocked to see. It's just not something that kids under 16 or 18 around those ages end up, being recommended by their doctors. It's not really something that doctors are trained to say, yes, this for this age group, this is an appropriate step to take. Usually that's gate kept to 18.
On that as well, because we have so many rules and regulations when it comes to tobacco or alcohol or any type of drugs. Driving a car, you can't even, rent a motel until you're like 25. There's some specific things
that's not
that
true.
need to put into place.
You can't rent a car.
I think would help protect our
Motels
children
are fine. Hotels are fine.
Minors themselves really don't know who they are until they become 25, 26 years old.
Wait, no, but that's not why you can't do that. You can't rent. You can't rent houses. You can't rent cars until you're 25 because, well, mostly because nobody wants to rent to that young. And, if kids are renting cars, they can cause a lot of damage. They can, like, kill people if they're not, if you rent some 16-year-old a Lamborghini, there's a good chance they're going to be immature, drive too fast, and get somebody killed. And insurance companies, car rental companies, and the general public are not in favor of that. That seems a bit dangerous.
Minds aren't fully developed, and it kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
So I did transition as a minor. I was a teenager who had a lot of mental health issues and had been sexually exploited and hated my body. And it ended with me kind of finding spaces where that was twisted into, no, you're just a boy in the wrong body. And it ended with me having my first ever medical intervention being a double mastectomy at 16 before any hormones, before anything else. And because of transitioning at such a young age, in the past 6 months, I have watched my body fall apart and waste away in front of me.
How old is this person?
Boy in the wrong, sexually exploited and hated.
They're not going to say.
In the past 6 months, I have watched my body fall apart and waste.
Also, let's be really, really clear about this. And we need to talk about this when it comes to detransitioners. This shit happens the same way that there is not just medical regret, but also medical mistreatment, I guess, is maybe what this would fall under. That's going to happen. It is. It happens for every single medical that's what I'm looking for, procedure that we do. This is not, it's not really that it's abnormal or it is normal. It's just simply a fact of medical advancement that there are going to be scenarios where people seek medical treatment and it's not the thing that they need. That has always been the case. It's always going to be the case. There is no getting away from that. The problem that a lot of the trans community has with the detrans community is that the detrans community is used as a bludgeon in an argument against trans people, to which it shouldn't be. Those people have their own unique experiences and should be treated with the respect as people who made decisions, made mistakes, were misinformed, were uninformed, were whatever ended up happening is what happened to them. And we should be treating those people with empathy, with sympathy, with support, and with a understanding that, hey, like, we need to make these processes better. We need to make these, the systems of transition better, maybe. Which a lot of this keeps developing, and we get better at understanding this stuff. But we can't simply use the very small percentage of people who detransition and were unhappy and were regretful of the entire process to undermine a incredibly large community of people that need the ability to live the life under the identity that they want to live under. There's always this talk about minors, and I get that there is concern over like what minors are allowed to do and everybody agrees that there should be barriers to what minors are capable of getting. If you ask me, Josh, should this person have been allowed to give their consent to to do a double mastectomy or whatever. Well, I think it was mastectomy. Mastectomy at 16, I would say, I don't fucking know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not her therapist. I'm not her doctor. I'm not any of these things. I can't tell you if one individual person is ready to make that decision at 16. I can tell you what the data tells us and what trends tell us in terms of when people are capable of making the decision. Medical consent, we decided, was 16 because we think that that is an age where you're mature enough to make decisions about your own healthcare. And maybe maybe it's the case that that fully transitioning, doing those kinds of surgeries, maybe an extra 2 years should be required. I don't know. I don't have that answer. But we certainly can't we can't shut down all of these people's avenue to get health care, because some people, and I stress this, a small minority, end up detransitioning because of dissatisfaction.
Away in front of me. You know, I have constant joint pain. I've watched my muscle mass waste away. I've watched my vocal cords hurt. I don't know if I'll ever be able to carry a child. The evidence we have suggests that the best way to figure out if gender dysphoria persists into adulthood is to let them grow up. Because a lot of these kids will grow out of it, and many of them will just grow up and end up being gay or gender nonconforming.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's really, as far as I've seen, there's no evidence of that. And the only way, and this is also the problem, the only way you figure that out is if we just don't, if we just tell trans kids, no, fucking deal with it. And we find out what happens as they get older. Because understand that under that format, under that decision to move forward with that kind of care, the options are, if you are a trans kid, or you might if you're 9 years old, you think you might be trans, right? Your options under this person's roadmap are get over it, or we'll find out how you feel about it later. Those are the options. And imagine you're dealing with this, and the adults in the room tell you, we're going to let you continue to be stricken with mental health, with mental health setbacks, with issues with dysphoria, not just with your body, but with your personality, with the way you present, with the role you want to play in life. We are going to saddle a generation of kids to not ever be able to take any action on any of this, so that we can figure out how much damage it's going to do to them. Quite frankly, this is why people argue for hormone blockers, because they're, at the very least, that buys you time to find out if that child is in a phase or if they're genuinely trans. But we already know that a large percentage of people who go on puberty blockers end up fully transitioning. So, not all of them, but again, a small minority, it's a phase. The argument, you would have to believe that the vast majority of trans people are living in a phase with this stuff. That a vast amount of these people who transitioned when they were younger are all just living in a phase to believe this. So it's, anyway, let's just continue because we're only 2 minutes in.
Can the disagreeer step forward?
I mean, if we're going to be honest, every major medical organization supports gender-affirming care for trans youth. They say it's safe and it's life-saving. And there are numerous studies that back that up.
The study that backs it up for puberty blockers is the Dutch protocol, and the same scientists...
I have 10 studies that I can bring to you right now.
The same scientists that brought that up have since rolled it back and said it was never supposed to be applied the way it has. The American medical industry, we all know, is money hungry and has gone off the rails.
Well, no, but that's for everything, though. They want to make money doing everything. That's not an argument against this specific specific avenue of healthcare. This would be the equivalent of saying we shouldn't develop this drug that cures you of coughing because we don't know, because A, the company who made it might make money, and B, maybe you'll get over the cough. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll develop a worse cough. But we need to let you suffer. We need to let you continue to cough until you can't cough no more, to find out if it's worth giving you a drug that stops you from doing so, that cures you of that.
I do agree that there are definitely some doctors out there that may be taking advantage of trans people, and I'm sorry that you went through this. Truly, I really am sorry. But trans kids are valid.
If you want, like, not only that, but not only that, I know I'm stopping a lot. I'm really sorry. But not only that, but you can solve that specific problem a lot, much easier, which is single payer healthcare, decommodification of the healthcare industry. If you want to solve that specific the money angle of this, then we just need to restructure our healthcare system. You know, that's the fix for that, not committing trans kids to just dealing with their gender, their gender dysphoria and wait for them to get over it, or, Roblox themselves, I guess.
It's healthcare.
I want to speak to that real quick. Like, I came out 13 years ago when I was 14, and I knew not that I was trans, but that I was a boy. I had to go through a lengthy process of therapy and seeing an endocrinologist and go through different tests and exams to make sure that this was real to everyone else involved. Transitioning and being trans was just a process I went through to become who I always knew I was. It wasn't a decision that I made. It was a life or death thing.
There's always people in my comment section. I really want to ask, for any of the conservatives in my comments, or maybe any of you hate watchers in my chat, should that person be going to the women's restroom? That's my question.
For me, and if I hadn't gotten on hormones and gotten surgery at 16, I don't know if I would be here.
As a father, I have 4 kids, and also as a
same
trans
question
person,
applies.
I think that knowing what it looked like for me as a child, and that experience of going through all of the turmoil and all of the trepidation around my gender identity, I would not put my children in that situation. And also, I don't think that surgeries should be allowed for minors. Like, when we look at the data and we look at the statistics and we look at the research, the vast majority of these surgeries are happening to adults. They're not minors. Yeah. So let's start there, right? And then further than that,
true,
if we look
it is a vast majority.
Puberty blockers are reversed.
Puberty blockers are medicines that prevent puberty from happening. They work by blocking the hormones testosterone and estrogen that lead to puberty-related changes in your body.
So when it comes to children, when we talk about puberty blockers,
I want to see if I can find the latest numbers.
It gives them autonomy over their bodies. It gives them a space that they can explore their expression. They can explore who they are without surgeries, without all of these other things that could have side effects. My kids were maybe 8 and 10 when I started my transition, and so I talked to them in kid terms. I told my son, I said, look, your mom, dad wants to be a dad because that's how I feel. And my kids being so young, they understood it. They were like, okay, we're with it, And so as they got older, I would bring them into my world and get them to understand the things that
I'm back.
That,
I know you missed me.
Going through, but now that they're adults, they understand differences in people, not just trans people, but people in general.
So there is such thing as gender fluid. How do you know that this kid is not going to change their gender expression later on? We really actually don't have studies on children that are taken over long term, like over 10 years, 20 years. You've only been on testosterone 14 years. One of the oldest trans men, Buck Angel, he almost died from testosterone. You're saying right now it saved your life, you may still die from it. You don't know. You're still
happy.
Exactly.
You'll die for ideology, and a lot of people have died for an ideology.
It's not an ideology.
But we have more people that are dying.
Yeah, like this is okay. This person's. Why do I feel like they're like? I feel like this person with the whole get up. I get the sneaking suspicion that they're like a influencer or something. But keep in mind, her example was one person, and also Buck Angel is rather on the older side. Like, Homeboy's been around quite a while. The science has developed a lot farther on since even when he was probably transitioning. So I feel like this is one of those, yeah, medicine wasn't as good back then. We recognize that. But also the idea that, people get nose jobs, people get, cosmetic surgery that can lead to them having health complications or whatever. It's usually small chances, but it can happen. But most people who get those will tell you that they appreciated the opportunity to make that decision for themselves. And most of them say, I would honestly guess to say, most of them would say, I'd rather get the change that I wanted to make. And, if there's consequences, I can live with those. But at least that was my choice. It was in my hands, from the start.
It's an idea that you were born in the wrong body.
Themselves. Look at the suicide rate of transmasculine folks. It is at 55%. And one of the factors that could save their lives is support, right? And so if we have folks that are committing suicide because they're not allowed to transition, how do we fix that? If you're telling me the transition for children or minors is something that shouldn't be done.
I am very sensitive to this subject, as I've been the person who has had to talk people off the ledge when it comes to suicidality. The discussion around how we talk about suicide is a very dangerous one in this community. My parents were told, do you want a dead daughter or a living son? That's not an appropriate way to talk about that.
And I understand that, but it is our transmasculine youth that are at the highest risk of suicide.
Yeah, that's incredibly manipulative. I don't even know if manipulative is the word, because I don't think that that's a manipulation by doctors. To me, that's a characterization of a pretty fair and backed up characterization of your possible outcomes. Because this person makes the point that the suicide rate for trans youth, specifically for trans youth for men, is incredibly high. 55% is a huge number. That's massive. So we need to deal with that. There needs to be an understanding that this isn't just you didn't buy me the eyeliner I want. You didn't get me the thing I wanted for Christmas. This is a fundamental part of people's identity. This isn't, I didn't get to go to a concert from my favorite band. This isn't, this isn't, I didn't get the car I wanted. This isn't any of that stuff. This is identity. This is the person that they are. And that's so much more important and so much more, I think, concrete and core to a person's being. I can understand that people think, well, it's kind of manipulative if an entire community, that being the trans community, always makes it into a let us transition or we kill ourselves. I can understand the manipulative nature of how that feels. But and this is really critical. What they're describing, again, I said all those examples before, they're not describing something frivolous. This isn't, when you hear kids who are, having trouble dating, whatever kids go through these days, this isn't like a thing they're just unhappy about. They don't like the person that they look at in the mirror isn't them. They don't see themselves. They see somebody else. And it's not this frivolous thing that we go, oh, you're just making a big deal because you want your way. No, they want to be their person, not their way, not any of that stuff. It's just, we need to understand the gravity of what this identity is and what it means to people.
Deserve help, but we also need to have a responsible conversation that is not using suicide as a means to push them down a pipeline before they have that comprehensive care.
So I have a question.
Sorry, Aris, I know you've been wanting to say
yeah,
something.
no, because I have a big problem. Oh, yeah, no, so, I'm not an interrupter. What I'm going to say is we insult children or youth so much by taking away their autonomy and their own agency over their own decisions and insulting that they know who they are. Like an adult knows who they are more than they do. No one knows who I am more than I do. Right. And it's always been that way. I've always known who I was. I've never felt like I was in the wrong body. I just had to adjust my body. And so I think taking away kids' agency and the right to their own body is, it's anti-human.
I have a question. Do you believe minors should be able to get tattoos or plastic surgery or consent to the list of other...
Don't minors, first of all, again, I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible. These, again, are frivolous things. You having a tattoo is you wanting art displayed on your body. That's not your identity. You having your nose changed to a more attractive or more utilitarian shape is not your identity. You can live without all of these things. You can't live as a different person.
Oh, wait, no, hold on.
I understand they are different things, but to what level do we... to what level do we give children bodily autonomy over everything they do? Because here's the thing, children need barriers in childhood development. You need barriers, and they need a safe way to push against those barriers. And I worry with the current medical system that instead of giving them a safe way to express themselves and push against barriers, we have taken some of those barriers away. And that is why you see more detransitioners, because those barriers have been lifted.
Yeah, they're not just dole.
Also, so whenever people say that there's more detransitioners now, right? There's they'll say like, we're seeing more and more detransitioners. Yeah, that is correct. You are going to continue to see more detransitioners. And the very simple answer to that is because there are more open and out trans people. As the community grows, as the community becomes more visible and more representative of its actual populace number, you're going to see that detransition number also rise. You know, a lot of anti-gay, anti-trans, all of the kind of anti-LGBT activists and pundits and everybody else always talks about, oh, we're seeing this rise in in gay people, in trans people. Why are we seeing it? It's because it's because degeneracy, it's because wokeism, it's because this, it's because that, right? When the actual answer is no, you're seeing a rise because people feel comfortable identifying publicly as their true selves. You're going to naturally see the number of trans people rise as transitioning, as that identity becomes more accepted in society. Trans people 10, 20 years ago did not have the visibility that they have today. They did not have the the discourse was not centered around them. Their rights were not talked about almost ever. Trans people 10 to 20 years ago were jokes, were the butt of jokes, were punchlines, were aberrant. But they're not now. And with that acceptance comes the ability to the permission to self-identify as that identity, as that kind of person. In the same way that number is going to rise, the number of detransitioners are going to rise. Because there's always going to be a percentage of trans people that detransition. The key to this is what that detransition number is. And if that number overtakes trans people, or if we find out, that, transitioning is bad in some way, to which we never have, then we can have that conversation. But to assert that now, while there's still a deep minority for the detransition community, just keep that in mind. Like, it's not shocking that number goes up. That's not a shocking phenomenon.
Pulling out surgeries for children, that's not happening.
I had a
anywhere.
letter from a therapist in a single visit at the gender clinic office
And
before
that
I
was
had
abuse
the first.
from that therapist who did not
that's
psychoanalyze the rest of your
not
issues.
happen.
Right, and that shouldn't
because
have
your
happened.
issues weren't being trans. There were a lot of other issues that you're
I have a
addressing right
diagnosis
now.
of gender dysphoria as
And
well.
you shouldn't. You were misdiagnosed.
No, I have one.
Right.
Yeah, you had to get a second opinion, honey.
And how was how was I supposed to do that when my parents were told
That's
that I
not
would
your
kill
fault.
myself?
But your
Yeah, that's not your
parents,
fault.
your parents,
Their biggest crime in all this was trusting a medical system that they thought would help me, and the professionals apparently not doing the right thing
I
here.
understand, but your
Yeah,
parents were
absolutely
responsible for the decisions that were made on your behalf.
I think that what this really highlights is the importance of you sharing your story, because what it shows is that you can't jump into these transitions, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't listen to these doctors that push you to transition just
Nobody
because you're
should.
feeling a certain way.
And keep in mind, there's going to be doctors that push you into transition. There's going to be doctors that push you away from it. The person, like, I feel really bad for I believe their name was Luca. I feel really bad because they are trying to come at this in an earnest way and kind of getting dogpiled a bit, just because I think their examples are very anecdotal. But there is a point to be made in that we shouldn't blanketly trust the medical system. That is the medical institutions, the hospitals, the doctors. A lot of these people are in it to make money for sure, but we have to draw the line at trusting science, trusting data, and trusting peer review studies, stuff like that, because we have to come to some kind of answer. We have to address this, and we have to have some kind of direction on where to go on a lot of this stuff.
Social media brainwashes teens to believe that they're trans.
I have to agree on that one. Like, there's this thing about it.
Right.
Like, yeah, there's this play that they have.
I don't think that it necessarily brainwashes children, but I think there are a lot of people who get into being queer or trans because it's trendy, and I know that's a really controversial thing.
Social media does this around everything, unfortunately. That's why social media is so damn harmful.
Statement to make as a trans person, but I have seen it, I have experienced it, and I also find that social media, especially apps like TikTok, give a lot of these kids so much misinformation and lead to
Rapid
people
fire
thinking they're trans
misinfo.
when there are much deeper issues, and everyone just wants to belong and find an identity, especially when they're young. You know?
I think brainwash is such a strong
that's a
word
very
to use
aggressive
there
word. I
when
would
it's
not. That's why I hesitated to step forward.
And that's why I
yeah.
would step in and actually say it's more so of like a social contagion.
It's just, yeah.
What got me to transition
No, damn it.
and actually say it's more so of like a social contagion.
It's just, yeah.
No, god damn it. Why did they flash that up so? Social contagion is the spread of emotions or behaviors from one individual to another, sometimes without awareness. Yeah, and that's like, yeah.
It's just, yeah.
And that's the,
What got me to
social media does that for a
transition
lot
in
of
the
things.
first place
For a lot
was
of things.
social media. It had a grasp on me that there could be something else out in the world for me during that discovery. And
keep in mind, Matt
played it
Walsh,
to the
Matt Walsh,
fullest
and
100%.
Michael
I even
Knowles and
passed as a
other
female,
people say that
for a
the
good,
being trans or
what was
the
it,
act of
5, 6
transitioning
years
is
out
the
of
social
7 that I was a
contagion.
transition-
No,
that I
it's
transitioned.
social
And
media and
later
the
down-
and their desire to keep you on their apps by any means necessary. Like TikTok is a great example of this, because they are trying to keep you scrolling as long as possible. So in a way, they're going to just keep feeding you and feeding you and feeding you and feeding you misinformation, disinformation, just as much as they can on the topic that you're interested in. So if you had the inkling or thought like maybe you're trans, there is the opportunity, if you go on TikTok, to be pushed down that rabbit hole and kind of given all the answers to the problems that you're maybe seeking a community to form around, for support, or even just trying to find answers online. Because kids, we know these days, that's where they look for answers. They have a question, they Google it. If they're feeling a certain way, how many times have you typed into Google like, is it okay to feel this, or feeling like this, or whatever, and looking for some article or something to kind of give you a maybe I'm old, maybe people do that on like Instagram and TikTok and stuff, but either way, you go looking for answers to why you might be feeling a certain kind of way. And for kids these days, that avenue is social media, that vehicle is social media, I should say. But and the social contagion part of it can be anything. The algorithm is the social contagion. The individual topics are, whatever you're into. It can be anything.
On the road, I went and paid out of pocket and talked to just a regular therapist, and she made me start questioning my own existence in a way, what I can do as a human being, not just as, a male or a female, but what can I contribute to the society? And it made me open up to maybe I was born as a male, and it feels empowering to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was heavy on social media. Like in my transition, Tumblr, that was the place to be for sure. And everyone was talking about their transition from my experience, and everyone was talking about a lot of mental health issues.
6 years ago, 2 years on testosterone.
And it was kind of being trendy
So
in
what
that
was
sense.
that? That was
when
like
TikTok came out, that was
2017?
like a whole nother world. And the biggest thing that I found with that is they weren't saying a lot of the negative things that were happening in their transition. There was always a positive outlook on it, I'm being who I need to be.
And keep in mind, the people who are making this content, I want to also stress, the people making that kind of content, the people who are celebrating their positive experience with transitioning, that's not really the problem here. The problem here is that TikTok isn't going to feed you the positive side and then feed you it's not going to inform you of these are the pros, these are the cons. If TikTok gets if in the algorithm, it gets the sense that you are looking for transition as an answer to, whatever, and it presents you with something that makes you feel good, you're going to keep scrolling. And because you keep scrolling, it's going to keep feeding you positive, 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 without giving you a nuanced, three-dimensional view of everything.
This is great.
And again, I say this, it happens for a lot of different things.
I made a
it's not
documentary
just
on my
trans,
transition, and I really went into depth
many different
of,
topics that you can
a lot
fall
of my
down these rabbit
depression
holes
that
too.
I dealt with on that, and I didn't find anyone talking about that.
I personally didn't think I was trans till I saw earlier trans YouTubers. Before I was just gender bending man. And for sure, I also feel like comparing
person's
yourself
name
on
is
social
Shape.
media to
That's-
other people that are more beautiful and
Wait,
successful
isn't
will
that
create dysphoria.
Michael
of some
Myers?
kind. And some people,
It will affect your self-image for sure.
Yeah,
we see
Michael
all
Myers
those
is the
beautiful
Shape.
trans women
That's
that
crazy.
are all dolled up or had every possible plastic surgery they could ever get. You're gonna feel dysphoria. You're gonna be like, I don't look like that.
I mean,
so
that's
I
in
have to go
general,
through
though.
steps.
You know what I mean? Whether
Yeah.
you're cis
Right.
or trans, everyone is
social media has
dealing with
such a-
that
I've fallen
for
into
sure.
that.
It has
looking
such
at,
a bad impact on
actors
mental
and stuff. I
health.
wanted to be that muscular dude, and I wanted to do
100%.
that. So
No,
yeah,
It is such a
does
bad,
exist.
well-documented bad impact on people's sense
Right.
of sense of
Yeah,
self
social
and
media
mental
is
health,
fucking
and so-
is
But I
fucking
also
cancer.
really quickly just want to
It's
say,
like
I don't want
mind
people to
cancer.
think that, social media is turning
Yeah.
people trans.
Yeah, we agree with that.
All right, can the disagree step forward?
Yeah, okay, so my thoughts on social media and everyone suddenly looking or being trans. I think whoever is leaning towards that or looking towards being trans for answers was always someone that felt that way or felt some type of way about their gender or their identity or the way they present themselves. They're just gonna go that way. I know plenty of femme twinks who went the muscle queen pipeline. It's not a rare occurrence. And so just
Dude,
experience
like,
your life.
I'm sorry. I just can't help but you got to kind of appreciate the world we live in a little bit sometimes, in the sense that when I was growing up, there was not really, I don't want to say options, but there weren't a lot of formats for being a man. It was muscles. It was, it was all the very traditional, very masculine muscles, beards, mustaches, big, all this stuff, right? Growing up, at least for me, there weren't, we didn't have twinks and femboys as a thing you could be and have an identity that was validated and not derided. People looked at small people who would, I don't think, be called twinks these days, but look at smaller guys and see prey, see weak men, see these, bitchy, weak guys, and would pick on them. And I don't know what schools are like these days, but at the very least, I think that you kind of have to, I think it's good to kind of appreciate that twink really, as far as I've ever heard anybody use it around me and in circles, it's not really derogatory. It's descriptive, but not derogatory. Even femboy isn't derogatory, really. It's simply a way of describing somebody, kind of a format that they fit into. But at least in my opinion, that's so much more freeing, I feel like, for people to be the way they are. For if there are men who, if there are boys, there are men who are more, who want to look that kind of femboy look. God damn, man. Fucking, at least you have, I'm glad that people have that format to look to and go, that's the thing. That's kind of how I fit in. That's where I'm at right now. I'm just saying, like, this is kind of unrelated, but I just think it's a positive development that we have different kinds of men now. We have twinks, we got femboys, we got bears, we got all sorts of stuff. And I appreciate that, because growing up, we didn't have that. Growing up, you were either, let's be honest, you were either an attractive traditional man or you weren't. Those were the two things. You were mostly either handsome or ugly. And I'm glad that we have different ways of describing fellas these days. That's all. And that's all. Just
try not to take social media seriously, because no one is advertising their failures. It's all fake.
Yeah, but I think it is also important to say that, like, social media is very, very effective. I mean, I personally scroll on TikTok and I'm like, do I have OCD? Do I have autism? Like, all these different things. And, like, it can suck you in. So it's important to be aware of those things.
I have a question for Samantha.
Yeah, if you've ever gone on WebMD, that's like all it is.
You've inspired people to transition?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think that I've inspired people to believe that it's okay to be transgender, it's okay to express themselves, and it's possible to live a happy and successful life.
How do you feel about the fact that some of them are going to regret the body modifications they got and going to have, like...
I think that they should go to a doctor that is well-versed in gender care and have the appropriate psychoanalytic analysis done beforehand.
That's like one of those, like, hey, I wore this really nice shirt, and then somebody's like, whoa, you inspired somebody to buy that shirt. What if they buy it and they don't like how they look in it? You gonna feel bad? It's like, well, no, I can't control that. Like, I can give you the option, I can give you the space to explore your personality, your being, but I can't make that everything to you. I can't make you fulfilled. That, like, that's not this person's job, and they're not ever going to be capable of that. Even if somebody, messages in and, were to comment and say, oh, you opened my eyes that I was trans and that, and I was able to do whatever. They're still not really responsible for that. They gave them the space, and the permission to explore an aspect of their personality, an aspect of their being, and that person took it.
That's not my
And
problem.
I feel like a lot of folks are going to social media looking for possibility models. They're looking to see if they're okay. I know for me, when I was very young, looking to see if there were other people like me, because for a long time I thought that I was
The only one.
Exactly.
I thought I was the
right.
only one.
And so feeling like that, like suicide was a thing for me.
Me too.
Right. And so when I did see a possibility model, when I did see somebody that looked like me, that put me in a space where I was
Humans are social creatures,
I'm
man.
okay.
Sigh of relief.
The you know,
I will say there's also
the
a difference from like showing people that you
isolation.
can have a positive life. And then
Isolation
telling
is a
them what
killer
to
for
do.
humans.
So I think you on your channel are kind of like, hey, look what I was able to do and how this made me feel, versus like, you should do this because I did this.
Right.
So I
And I'm
think,
also, I try my best to be very upfront
right,
about the
because
issues
we
of
can't help if
transition.
someone's
Exactly.
going
And not everyone's going to be a great
that's inevitable.
Yeah.
We're humans.
a great
One more
communicator
thing
in that
like
regard.
Like,
Not
if I'm
everyone's
watching her
going to be the best
channel and
presenter.
It inspires me to transition. I have been watching white straight men be president for years, and I've not wanted to be president once. So I don't identify with that. If we're going to talk about brainwashing, let's talk about where we see things every single day happening a certain way versus someone just living their life authentically.
People with gender dysphoria need therapy, not surgery.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that one.
Well, yeah.
I'm convinced.
If you have gender dysphoria,
It's potentially both, though.
Yeah.
I think everyone with
You
gender
get therapy
dysphoria
and
needs to
maybe
go
you
through
need surgery.
therapeutic process and mental health care before they make that choice for themselves.
Exactly.
I personally confused a lot of my gender dysphoria for body dysmorphia because no matter how much I feminize my body, till today I still don't feel comfortable in my own body. And now, like looking
That's unfortunate.
among like members of trans community, I see that people keep on getting more and more surgeries. The surgeries
you
are
ever
no
seen?
longer affirming.
There's
You
like
can just
a
tell
there's
that
like
this
a
person is, like,
girl
struggling
who
with
got
body
a bunch of
image.
surgeries to
I
look
was able
like
to get
Barbie.
an estrogen pretty quickly
Like the
when I
doll.
was 22.
It was
and
wild.
My mental health declined afterwards, and
Also, keep in mind, this is a conversation about minors. This person did all of this at 22. They just said so. You're an adult. Not to be mean, but you kind of made the wrong. Like you were a full adult and you still made that mistake. People make mistakes with this sort of stuff, but I just don't really know if this person's really applicable to the conversation.
I attributed it to being still in the wrong body, needing more body modification, end up getting sex reassignment surgery.
Sorry, I'm
I
gonna
Needs to go
restart
through
really quick.
therapeutic process and mental health care before they make that choice for themselves.
Exactly.
I personally confused a lot of my gender dysphoria for body dysmorphia because no matter how much I feminize my body, till today I still don't feel comfortable in my own body. And now, like looking among like members of trans community, I see that people keep on getting more and more surgeries. The surgeries are no longer affirming. You can just tell that this person is like struggling with body images. I was able to get on estrogen pretty quickly when I was 22, and
Yeah, this person
my
got
mental
this
health
stuff done
declined
when they're an
afterwards,
adult.
and
So
I attributed it to being still in the wrong body, needing more body modification.
Also,
end up
yeah,
getting
if you go on
sex reassignment
estrogen
surgery. I do believe that
after your
transition was
puberty,
sold to me as a hardware
it's
fix
not shown
for
to
my
have
mental issues that were not
as
addressed.
good of
I still struggle
results.
with internalized homophobia that pushed me into transition in the first place. I struggle with borderline personality disorder, body dysmorphia. I'm on a spectrum, and I'm ADHD, and I have all those issues that were not helped, and I was still struggling with them after transition, and I still do. Overall,
I gotta ask. I don't know why they brought this person on. I'll be very, very honest. In a conversation about minors transitioning or not, I don't think this person is appropriate for this conversation, quite frankly.
after a few years, I came to a conclusion that I was not in the wrong body, that I'm a gender non-conforming man, and I am a feminine man. That's what I am.
I don't know if you guys have heard, but I've had a lot of binary trans people say that it's not a mental health issue, like if you're trans, and I know I don't agree with that. Like, I think there's a disconnect between the mind and the body. I guess I'm asking that. Like, it's like, do you think that it's a mental health disorder? And
I don't
needs to
think
have
being
therapy?
transgender is a mental health
disorder,
disorder. I think, gender incongruence is what they're referring to it as now.
Gender incongruence has been moved out of the medical and behavioral disorders chapter and into the new conditions related to sexual health chapter, trans-related and gender diverse identities are not conditions of mental ill health, and that classifying them as such can cause enormous stigma. Yeah, because the idea that oh, you're sick, you're trans, you don't believe that you that your personality aligns with your gender presentation, like, you know, you're sick, you're not well, you're, you know, whatever these things. What is sick, what is unwell are kind of subjective to a degree, mainly because the way in which how we draw those boundaries are based on kind of our societal standards, norms, and needs to a degree, I would say. So in that way, because one could make the argument that, well, you're not in danger if you're gender incongruent, right? Like, you're not in danger of anything. What you're in danger is the effects that has, what state that leaves you in. That kind of malcontent with your presentation, with your body, with all of your identity, leads to something bad, which is suicidal ideation. But the gender incongruence isn't itself the thing that kills you. It's the effect of it, basically.
It's listed as a
I don't know if I'm
health
saying it the
concern,
right
but
way.
the
I'm not a
gender dysphoria,
doctor or
which is the
anything,
symptom that arises when you are transgender,
Yeah,
is a
it's-
mental
yeah,
health
yeah.
concern.
So maybe I'm thinking of, like, that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say then in a sense.
And then
Yeah.
once you are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and I feel like this is kind of what the prompt is kind of hinting at, if you do have gender dysphoria, the only treatment for that is transition.
Right.
Whether that be just a social transition, a medical transition, whatever transition fits you, that is the only way to heal your gender dysphoria. When I transitioned,
Certainly
the
a
first thing my mom
sliding
said to me
scale.
was, can't you just be gay? It hurt hearing that, but a big reason that she said that was she was afraid of what my dad would think.
But
He's always
if
been
they're
very,
gay,
very
they can't have big
conservative, very
titties.
traditional, you could say. He would make comments about trans people, about gay people growing up. So I always knew that he wasn't necessarily accepting.
I still hear stuff like that from like normal
So when it
people.
came down to me transitioning,
It's like side comment,
I
you know,
said
it's
to
like
him, I'm
offhanded
going to do this.
comments.
Either you're going to be the dad
rough.
that accepts me and supports me through it, or like goodbye. And he chose to support me, and we're closer than
Oh,
ever
good
now.
for him.
And I think a lot of us go through medical transitions to easier go through social transition.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And so a lot of our folks that do transition and may detransition, both
Yeah, keep in mind the
experiences are valid,
surgeries,
but also
you know, the surgeries just let
understanding
you
that we're
exist a
not
little easier.
mentally ill because we're trans.
Yes.
Right. And I think that there should be a psychiatrist or someone within behavioral health to be able to say, okay, you're in the right frame of mind to make this decision. But I want to just make it very clear that trans people are not dealing with mental health because they're trans.
Absolutely.
I disagree. I feel like transgender is definitely, and elderly trans people afford for it to be classified as mental illness, so it's covered by insurance. Otherwise, why are you getting the surgeries to?
Because
but
of
if it's not a
dysphoria.
medical condition?
The dysphoria is a medical condition.
It is, but it's in your head. I would say that you have some kind of mental disorder if you're trying
right.
to mimic a stereotype of opposite sex. to
Right,
But
pass
it's
in
not a
society.
mimic. It's
The treatment for
aligning.
this mental illness is to transition.
I have a question though,
Yeah.
because I have a gender dysphoria diagnosis. I always have. But I'm still where I am today.
Can I give you my honest opinion? I think that you were probably misdiagnosed.
I
and
don't think I was.
So you
Do you
do
feel
have gender dysphoria?
in your body?
I certainly do now.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
I
because
mean,
of the
you
change that you
want
made.
to talk about now, but at the time,
At the time, did
at
you?
the time, I genuinely believed I did. I thought it would save me. And then looking back, I realized that my dysphoria stemmed from some severe trauma that was not.
Yeah, but yeah, that's what she was saying, is that you're misdiagnosed then, which happens, sadly, but it does happen. It's not impossible.
Handled.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why I think that mental health step is so important.
Yeah,
Because I've heard this from several other, mostly female detransitioners who we had some form of pretty bad trauma that spawned gender dysphoria symptoms.
Yeah.
and we can disagree about misdiagnosis or something later, but it felt real at the time for me.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it did. I didn't mean
And
that in
no,
a
I know.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where that's where the mental health treatment really needs to come in and get to the root of that issue, because oftentimes, specifically with the detransitioners I've talked to, that was ignored. You know, I came out to my parents in a mental health facility after telling the therapist that I thought I was transgender. And she told me we had to tell your parents so that way you can get the help you need. It led to me seeing a gender therapist who, honestly, the issues I was facing were never addressed. To this day, no one ever addressed the fact that I had severe, like, trauma and exploitation going on as a young teenager. Instead, I was kind of just...
Yeah, that's... Unfortunately, this is kind of the case for a lot of people who seek therapeutic treatment. Unfortunately, in any field proctored by humans, there's going to be these people who fall through the cracks, who don't get the right healthcare they need because they're not aware of the healthcare they need, and sometimes whatever therapist they're seeing also isn't aware or capable of offering them the healthcare, the guidance, whatever that they also need. I don't think that what this person went through is didn't happen. I certainly don't think that it's uncommon, I guess. It's just simply, there are always going to be bad doctors, there are always going to be bad therapists, there are always going to be imperfections in any medical process. This is something that every medical process, even in ADHD diagnosis, everything, there's always these very clear again, I say cracks in the system, but I just don't really know another way to explain it. There's always going to be this. The goal is to keep that to a bare minimum as possible. But yeah, and again, this person might have had gender dysphoria, they might not have, but if that came on because of other things, it's because those weren't addressed. And because they went to go see a gender doctor because that's what they communicated, what they thought they needed, then it's just this process is imperfect, and it's always going to be imperfect. And the best thing you can do is advocate for, safeguards and for making sure that the process is as perfected as you can get it. But there's never going to be a zero rate of detransition. It's never going to happen. It's never going to be zero.
Just affirmed in, you believe this, and instead of even just a little pushback, it led me to the point where the very first medical intervention I ever had was a double mastectomy at 16. A few months after that, I started testosterone because it was the next step of what I was supposed to do.
God intended for there to be only two genders.
Tragic.
Okay, you go first.
Okay, so as a Christian, I truly believe that God created male and female, and he created that throughout life, throughout the nature, throughout the wildlife, throughout, Earth itself.
Right.
And then the arguments come up into the ocean sides of, well, there's these asexual creatures and stuff like that. Well, they were designed that way for a reason, and we humans were not designed to, we were designed to procreate and be able to bring life back to the earth, because we live and we die, we live and we die. It's a rotation of a process of life in itself, and it's
that is what
journey.
All animals do.
So
yeah.
I truly do
They
believe
do all
that there
live
is
and then they
male
die and then
there
live and
is
then
female.
die.
But I can respect people's choices. However, that's where I stand on it.
Well, I'm not Christian, but I do believe there's only two biological sexes, and somehow that's how it's been designed, whether it's by higher power or by evolution. I do believe gender expression has been on a spectrum for
you know, it's funny. If anything, it's evolutionary efficiency. Even though, again, there are asexual people. There are, you know, people with, you know, not with, you know, divergent sex traits, stuff like that. It's not that there's anything wrong with them. They're just different, really. And it's kind of the understanding of like, well, if they exist, if suddenly there was this huge spike of asexual or divergent, you know, people, what, you know, we make space for those people. They need to exist like everybody else. You know, the purpose of humans, I think, I personally, and this is where I'll say my belief, I personally think we've gotten past our purpose is to procreate. I think our purpose is a lot grander than that and a lot bigger than that now. But that's just me. I mean, you know, that's just
centuries. So
that's
we
broad
do have
belief.
References to people who've been cross-dressing. We have references to eunuchs. And as somebody who went through transition,
don't eunuchs like chop their dick off?
when I
Isn't that what
started
that
taking
is?
testosterone, it's almost like reminded me of my original blueprint. And I feel like I went against my original blueprint and I did a lot of damage to it. And I just cannot go back to who I was, because without my testicles, I'm just too far gone in my transition. So that's where I'm at.
Can the disagree step forward?
Yeah, you know, we have historically spent more time focusing on and celebrating several genders. There are several different cultures throughout the world that celebrate the different genders, and to negate the fact that they exist and to negate their validity is just wrong.
There are as many intersex people as there are redheaded people on.
Intersex is an umbrella term used to describe a wide range of natural variations that affects genitals, gonads, hormones, chromosomes, and reproductive organs. 1.7% of the population is born with intersex traits.
On the planet, I can name 12 people off the top of my head who are born intersex. So to pretend like there's man and woman is just erasing an entire group of people. The God you speak of, the first God that intersex people get to meet is the doctor, because it's up to their discretion of just what you're gonna be when they mutilate their body to be a man or a woman, and that is not fair.
Yeah. Right.
Right, and I think also gender and male and female is not the same thing.
Biological sex are different things.
Yeah, we're talking about gender, which is like gender identity, the social aspects to being a man or a woman.
Sex is a label, male or female, that you're assigned by a doctor at birth based on the genitals you're born with and the chromosomes you have. Gender is much more complex. It's a social and legal status and set of expectations from society about behaviors, characteristics, and thoughts. Yeah, you know, if you ever heard somebody say real men do this, real women do this, that's why nobody says real males do this, real females do this. They say real men, women, because there are expectations that are societally designated that are not universal, but there's a lot of crossover amongst many different cultures. People will say that they're universal, but they're not perfectly universal. There's maybe a few that are, and even then they're not universal. To say anything is universal is unfortunately a pretty big over calculation. Almost nothing when it comes to humans is universal. We can look at a majority, sure. We can look at a plurality. We can look at most, or whatever whatever adjective you want to give to that, however you want to describe that. But nonetheless, gender is just referring to general societal characteristics, traits, behaviors, kind of what your society needs. Whereas male or female is what we, when you come out, the word we use to describe you based on what genitals you have.
Woman, but male and female dictate sex, so like body parts.
I disagree with the having sex and gender being two different things.
Okay,
I believe them to
fact.
be one. So I believe that there is, they're the same, they're one and the same.
Then why are they
They're
two
not
different words?
Different, but we have evolutionary problems within the humanity, because I also see that there are intersex animals that do exist, and that's how they're born. but I also do believe that the initial design was for man and woman, and then somewhere along the way, viruses, mutations, diseases, plagues, all that type of stuff that we have in the world does play a part back onto the world itself. But I believe the initial intent was for God to create Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. I'm just gonna say it.
That's homophobic.
I know it sounds homophobic, and I understand.
No, it is homophobic.
It is homophobic.
That's okay.
Homophobia made me transition, and that's what you're perpetuating right now. I grew up in a very homophobic family, and since I was
that was triggering for this person, which is fair. The whole like, well, God created Adam and Eve. I don't really have that much to say to it besides that's just your opinion, man. And I'm sorry, but I'm not okay with us building structures, building social norms around your feelings. It's just not what we do, at least here in the US. In secular nations, we've decided to put dogma, suspicion, all that stuff aside in favor of what can we prove, what can we observe, what can we recreate.
As a kid, I was always brainwashed, said gay is bad. My parents were not happy that I was naturally feminine. They always tried to make me more masculine. They tried to give me to masculine sports. I was mercilessly bullied at school for my femininity, constantly being told that I'm not
you're
a
an
real
incel?
man,
I did not know that.
And
You
when I
should
came out to my parents
reconsider
as
that.
gay, they took me to therapists and tried to do pretty much conversion therapy on me, which failed.
So I don't believe
I can
in God.
imagine.
I believe in people that exist right in front of me, and I believe they should have the right to exist. And so
I'm not saying they don't have the right to exist. I'm
no,
just
but
saying,
I mean,
I'm just saying that was the
they weren't
initial
mistakes
intent.
either. They're just here the way you and I are here right now, and they are who they are, and we have to accept people as they are.
Right, and there are biological differences in trans folks. When we look at the brainstem, our brainstems are different. Like
Neurologically.
Right, neurologically, we're different.
Yeah,
and
male
so
and female are different, exactly.
Trans people are different.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, while he's correct, there is like the understanding that males and females are actually no. Now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever actually seen any evidence that there's such thing as a fully male or fully female brain. We do see similar traits among most females, same with most men in terms of chemistry and in terms of some developmental development, my fucking dumbass, in terms of like developmental growth in males versus females and even males and other males. But in terms of like the actual human brain, from what I understand, and I don't have a deep scientific knowledge of this, almost everybody's brains are like not at all what's the word, mirrored in other people's. Like we are all so very different. The way that it's structured, and like you have the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, all of that stuff seems to be the same, but almost everything else seems to be rather different. And even so, we can say that, oh, well, we notice these trends in males and females that kind of, show trends amongst both those groups, to which one has to ask, when did we start studying that? And was that before or after the effects of social conditioning? Over the course of thousands of years, if all of the females in a society, in some fucking village in the middle of nowhere, if all of the females are bred to a degree to act a certain way, to kind of what's the word I'm looking for, to play a certain role in society, it makes sense that I think it tracks that if you go and look at their brains 2, 3, 4, 500 years in the future, after that village starts, after that society begins, you're gonna be like, whoa, a lot of these women show a lot of very similar trait. a lot of the females show all these very similar traits. I wonder why that is. Well, we can chalk a lot of that up to evolution and evolutionary development. There is a aspect of that I think also needs to be accounted for. But anyway,
they've found a distinct difference in the
white matter.
cortex.
There is no biomarker for trans. Some brain scan of some gay males is identical to female brain, but there is no biomarker for trans. Please don't spread misinformation.
There is science that hints towards it. It's just not confirmed.
No, there's research.
So therefore, it falls
that.
under the belief that there is, but there is no scientific fact to back that up, which therefore I believe that God's initial intent was to create male and female.
If God
I really
intended
get irritated with religious
if God
people.
exists and in
It's
the way that you
always-
believe and just
it's
intended
always
to
this
make
like, well,
male
I
and
believe
female,
it.
then
You can't
And
disprove
we
it.
would be-
Therefore,
I believe
Intersex
in,
people would
very
answer
in a
irritating.
higher power, right?
it's hard to have.
own.
It's hard to have
and God
discussions.
is not this thing that creates rules and binary situations and laws that can be broken or really made. We're just all here.
Yeah.
You know, like I was born in a female body, but I was never a girl. Never, ever, ever. I can't explain why, but that is my truth. That is the fact. That is who I've always been. And there's no way that I'm gonna look up at this guy at some guide and be like, oh yeah, you made me as a mistake.
Transitioning improved my sex life.
Interesting.
Who wants to start?
So that's I was gonna say that's a
I'm
personal one.
embarrassed.
Not to say that my sex life was bad before, but I think transitioning and coming into my body and feeling comfortable in my skin allowed me to open up more and allowed me to not only
that makes sense.
be better in bed, but also
Sex is certainly better when
explore what my sexuality looks like.
when like you know
Being trans also, like-
you're being yourself.
Made sex really complicated for me too, because I'm a straight guy and I pass very well, and majority of the women that I've been with, I would have to eventually kind of like break it to them that I was trans and deal with a lot of rejection. And with somebody, I would never let girls touch me or see me without clothes on. Not having a penis made me feel inferior as a man, and that no one would want me, which is why I like rejected that part of myself and never.
Which that's like a big experience with that's like a big experience even for men. There are men who have insecurities about the actual penis that they have, that they're, you know, embarrassed or you know, not proud of. That's a phenomenon that's not even exclusive to trans men.
Never even let
You
it
know, there are
be
guys who are
loved.
like
It took
a small
lot
dick.
of
It's
really
like, nah, dude.
accepting that people
Celebrate
were
your
going
dick.
to accept me
Dick's great.
and be attracted to me and love me and want to give me pleasure regardless of what was in my pants. And that took a long time. It took until I was like, I think I was 21, when my ex-girlfriend and I started dating. From that point on, I realized that just letting someone love me was half the battle. And once I let that piece come into play, I mean, it changed my life.
Do you want to go? You want to go?
Oh, nice.
Y'all can go. I'll go last.
I mean, so even though I detransitioned, in the beginning, especially when I was on hormones,
yeah,
like,
there's one of
it
the
increased my
detrans
sex drive
people.
a
That's
lot, and
interesting.
there were a lot of aspects to that was like enjoyable to explore my fluidity for sure. I was able to date a lot of people, and I think like from detransitioning, it's like the opposite of that. Like my sex drive completely changed.
Yeah, that sucks.
In a way that like there's good aspects to not being horny 24/7. It helped me be more comfortable in my body, even with detransitioning, which sounds weird, but like having a trans male body was like so different from the norm. So like I had to accept certain parts of myself. So like even with detransitioning, it helps me accept like certain parts of myself that I don't have still.
Absolutely.
I did identify as a gay man before I transitioned. And like those relationships, I feel like I always kind of had like out of body experiences when we were like intimate. And even after I transitioned, before I had bottom surgery, I like
Interesting.
just like the anxiety and the dysphoria that I would feel whenever I was intimate, or like a partner would try to be intimate with me, was just like crippling.
Yeah.
So then when I had surgery and I felt more affirmed in my body, and you know, it feels right to me now, I'm finally able to have those intimate connections with people, and you know, form those deeper bonds. So it's really helped me a lot.
I'm so happy for you. That's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
When I came out as trans when I was 18, I moved to Miami, and it
Oh,
wasn't
no,
until I got my
Miami.
gender-affirming surgeries where I was
Not a fan of Miami, for the
where I
record.
did like lose my virginity because I was just not comfortable doing that. I was like, I'm not presenting in my best light, and I think I could get there.
Yeah, for me it was like I'm not fitting the role that I'm supposed to play in this relationship.
It felt weird, and you also attract a different type of partner. Back in my day, I used to attract what we call a chaser. Versus
A person who
was
dates
genuinely
hooks up with a
attracted
certain
to
type of
the
person,
female
such as a
form,
trans
which is
person.
someone who I wanted to like.
Such as
the
trans
role
people,
I
sorry.
felt. And so that's where I was comfortable. And now
I've heard that gets thrown around
in Virginia.
a lot.
Virginia, the T word did not exist.
Hey
That was on
there.
Jerry Springer
Hey.
and Maury Povich, and that's where that stayed. no one.
Hey,
was
I'm from
trans.
Virginia.
So I transitioned when I was about 18. I moved to Miami, and my joke is that I hit the tarmac, and I said, I'm a woman, by the way. I remember I came out to my mom, and I was super nervous because I'd
What if
come
I
out
went to
as
school with this
gay
person? That'd be
years
fucking
and years
wild.
before, because that was so much easier. But when I
There's
came
like
out,
no
I
ch-
remember
I guess
my
there's
mom
not
just
no
asked if I was
chance.
happy, if I was healthy, and if I was going to finish school because she had already paid for it. And I said yes.
Can the disagree step forward?
Transition definitely ruined my sex life. I was fine with my penis, but a year after estrogen, I felt like that part didn't belong on me anymore.
Again, I seriously
went ahead and had sex
don't think this person is
surgery.
appropriate for this
After
conversation.
that, my sex drive was
Mainly
gone
because
pretty
they're
much.
not
I kept on having
trans.
complications. I wasn't able to keep my neo vagina open despite rigorous dilation. I had multiple revisions.
And
including
also, I kind of,
plastic.
I don't know.
just got
I
some of my
don't know.
sex
I'm not
drive
the
back
arbiter of who gets to have
last
these
year when I started
conversations. I just,
detransitioning with testosterone,
I'm not
but it's
sure
kind
if
of
any of
traumatic
this is
to have male sex drive back
appropriate
without
since
my penis.
they didn't transition.
Also, I want to say that sexuality
when
is
they
fluid.
were
My sexuality
younger
has
or
definitely changed
whatever.
once
So
I lost my
anyway,
testosterone.
I'm just nitpicking a bit.
Before, I was strictly attracted to men. After I lost my testosterone, I was attracted to people in general.
Love their hair though.
Because
Their hair's
now
phenomenal.
I didn't have
It's a lot of
this, like,
fun.
male sex drive, so I couldn't relate to men as much. You know,
I
they
like the
wanted to have sex,
green.
but I just wanted to hold hands and cuddle. And now my body dysmorphia / actual gender dysphoria as well is worse than ever before. I do feel like I'm stuck in a surgically created body. I just don't think I've been really myself by trying to become a woman. Yeah, so transition did take a lot from me.
That's been really, really hard. Yeah.
It's okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
If you had like found the results that you desired in the beginning, would you feel differently than you do now?
No, because I realize I just miss being a man, you know, I just miss being obsessed about sex and money. I don't want to do the whole emotional thing. And I'm talking about stereotypes.
See,
okay?
I just,
so
you
I
see,
regret-
I just, I
I'm
don't.
just like now I'm a medical patient for
I
life.
don't know, man.
Also, having sex
I
with
just-
back, it just reminds me that
I don't
lost
know
all
if
the
this
years I
person's
could've been
really
having fun, whether
applicable
it's
to this
chasers.
conversation.
I definitely have internalized homophobia. So internalized homophobia also pushed me into transition because I felt like chasers weren't good enough because I wanted to be a woman. I wanted to escape my homosexuality. But now I realize at the end of the day, I'm a gay man and I'm still living with internalized homophobia because therapists actually never helped me with that.
It's fascinating that you say that because I dated men and women, and in my transition, I felt like I had an internalized homophobia when I was with men because I didn't feel like a gay man. And that was really hard for me to like figure out because I had this journey for so
like,
long. And
people are fucking
a lot of sexual
complicated.
experiences were
I
good,
think the
but
most
I was on
irritating
Grindr,
thing about
and I'm sleeping with these men and
talking with
they're treating
like
me how I want to be
watching
treated
like Matt
in a
Walsh
social setting,
stuff
but I'm
and
like, I was
some
really,
of
really
the
masculine in my
conservative
presentation,
angle on a
but
lot of
I
this
tended to
stuff
be
is
kind of feminine
is
in
it's
my
always
roles,
this desire to
within
make
sex.
humans
And so
very
I think that also got me to realize that I wanted to detransition because it was a reflection of the relationships that I had. Like, to follow kind of some stereotypes, like I did miss being a woman in some of those like social settings, like with
very
how women
quartered
interacted
off.
with me, with how men
very like I find that whenever I watch Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, any of these people, a lot of the anti-trans folks, and same with even anti-gay folks from back when in my youth, right? I just feel like there was always this desire for everything to be simpler. Like the idea that humans are really complicated and our brains are so complex and everything else. I feel like it just scares these people. Like Matt Walsh is scared of trans people. not because he's worried they're gonna assault him or assault his wife in the bathroom, but because he's scared of that imagination and that the idea that people are not these simple things, that the world isn't good, evil, black and white, that it's all grays and it's all a mess. Like, I don't know. It's just
with me. Like, so yeah, that's heavily relatable to that for sure. So I do not regret my transition. Shocking, I know. That was like a really great time for me in the beginning. I really was able to explore and express myself in ways that I could not have done without hormones and surgery. I learned so much about how people treat people based on gender and looks in general. I feel like I would not be the person, especially the confidence and security that I have within myself if I didn't transition as presenting as a woman in this world. My dynamic with men in general is so much different. I mean, I was very insecure, very submissive, very quiet, and now I'm able to speak up for myself because of that.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say, during my transition, I didn't actually.
I mean, this person is a Christian. Their sex life is probably trash to begin with.
Ever since I came back, my sex drive has been higher ever since, and I think it's because I'm no longer on the estrogen. My testosterone levels are increased after I changed back to being who I was originally born as, and it also kind of opened up my eyes to say, maybe I wasn't really a female. This is probably what I would like my future spouse to have, to look upon it. And I'm proud that I actually have that sex drive back again, because I felt like I lost it for a long time.
The LGBTQ plus community is not as accepting as they claim.
This I've heard things. I don't have an experience in this, so I'm probably I don't think I'm gonna have a lot of comments on this.
Musical chairs.
Musical chairs?
Yeah. I'm embarrassed to agree. That is true information.
There's still so much transphobia within the LGBT people in the LGBT community that hasn't been addressed yet.
Shoot, there's transphobia within trans people.
Absolutely. When I was transitioning in high school, I searched for acceptance from the cis hetero world. And now I feel like I'm doing the opposite and searching for acceptance from my own community half the time. Like when I was in college, the queer community on my campus hated me because I did like heteronormative like guy stuff. I played lacrosse, I was in a frat, but like I wasn't that guy, I guess, that they had in their head. And every time I would go to the LGBT club meetings, I would get like they would stare into my soul like I was just this awful thing. And it's always just made me feel invisible and small in whatever space I'm in. And I find that just really disheartening.
And it happens in a lot of other cultures and communities as well too. So
it's funny that
just happens.
You mentioned like the transitioning in high school part and like that shift from.
Yeah, keep in mind with almost any of these kinds of communities, not just like the LGBT community, but even like Christian communities and stuff like that.
I did notice
people
that when I was
gatekeep, people
when
are shitty to each other.
All of a sudden, it was like I wasn't welcome in these spaces anymore.
Again, I said it earlier. People are complex, man.
That icky feeling of like you only want me here because of that.
Yeah,
and you know now I have the detrans aspect where no community wants me. No one. Like I'm still part of the
detrans.
I'm part of the LGB part, but I've lost people that I thought they liked me for me, and it didn't matter what I was.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, detransitioning was the thing that I've been called a traitor.
Yeah, me too.
You know, it's.
Well, I feel like if you detransition, you're not a traitor. But if you're creating content to push people down that route, then I do think that that's not traitorous, but certainly. So this is one of those things where every time I feel like this happens with the younger generation. They put themselves out there, or they put like, you know, their opinions and all this stuff, and they put it all out there, and I don't know if they expect positivity or if they expect negativity, but I always find that people get really upset because they get pushback, because they get vehement pushback, and they're like, oh man, like people really you know, I talk about this controversial topic and a lot of people vehemently disagree with me, and I can't help but sometimes be like, you kind of got to accept that a little bit. You have to understand that if you want to talk about these topics, you have to understand that there are going to be people that are upset by your opinions every single day, every day. And the best thing you can do is just be honest and try to learn and not try to proselytize. That's also another aspect of you know, some of the detransition stuff that I think could be worked on. Is I sometimes feel like there's a lot of proselytization. There's a lot of this, oh, well, I've been through it. My individual experience outweighs a lot of data that tells us, yes, this can happen, but you're in the minority. You still need to be there, but we can't allow the minority to set the boundaries for the majority, you know? So that's all. It's just,
They don't want me. The rest of the world doesn't want me.
That's not true. That's not true.
It can often feel that way. It can feel isolating.
But it feels really isolating. Like, this is not a club.
It's not a
you
club.
know? And it's not like a personality trait that I'm just taking up and...
oh, God, preach.
God forbid one day I change my mind. I won't, but like, or something happens where I have to detransition. I would hope that the people who stood by my side through everything else would still be there for me because of who I am, period. And not because of an effing label over my head.
And even when I transitioned, I dealt with the traitor to everyone. It was, you know, oh, you want to be a man and the patriarchy. And I was like, I get it, but also... also,
like, sure.
But
That's
what
fair.
I found very interesting was like this divide between trans men and trans women. When I first started doing a lot of advocacy, I was told that just being in the space, that I was taking up too much room, that I was taking up too much space and don't speak and all of these things. And I was like, wait a minute, but I'm trans too, right?
Yeah.
This community also belongs to us too.
Right.
So that was something that I grappled with for a while.
Yeah, because there's always
hung out with a lot of gay women.
there's always
and
a
when
real
I
obsession with
transitioned,
trans
I definitely lost
women
my space
because
there, and that
it's
was
men.
really hard for me to navigate because
It's always really weird. It's why conservatives, and part of that is because conservatives seem to be more obsessed with men being, you know, men transitioning to women than the opposite direction. There seems to be a deep bias or like just deep interest in that specific direction of transition for whatever reason. I'm assuming it's, you know, latent homophobia and probably a little bit of insecure masculinity, whatever. But you know, a bit of the patriarchy, I'm sure. But there is an obsession with trans women for whatever reason. There is just it is just so aberrant to them. And it's why we have to always be taught why trans women we talk about a lot more than trans men, even though trans men deserve as much of the conversation.
Really hard and difficult. And then when I got to the trans male community, there was a lot of competition. Who looked the best, who passed the best, like that was very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
Shoot, fortunately I had a full beard, so it was like an easy, like...
I love how the
you know,
trans man
like,
community is
still,
basically
I
like
heavily
the
resonate with
normal
trans men still.
male
I definitely
man
resonate with trans
community.
women from detransitioning and
Like,
gender
how many
nonconforming.
men, you know, will do like the I have a real beard, you have a fake beard, I have a whatever. Like this is stuff we rib each other as guys, like who's more manly, all the rest of that stuff. And doesn't that show you that, is that not emblematic that these people are what they say they are? If when stuck into a room, you know, when put into a room as a group, they're acting as manly as any of the men that I've shared locker rooms with, been friends with, you know, gone to get drinks with, all of this stuff. Right? Yeah.
People, so it's like, where do I belong?
Weird position to be in because it's like one community, like I said, doesn't really want you, but you don't fit in. You can't really go all the way back, so you don't fit in with the rest of them.
We just shouldn't have to categorize.
Yeah,
Like, we shouldn't have to float around, wonder where we belong. Like,
we
it
have
shouldn't-
we
I don't
have the
understand
other
why it has to matter.
detransitioners,
Like,
but even then, we're all still vastly different individuals who have vastly different life experience, political views, religious beliefs.
Right.
You know,
You're not just
experience
a
how we
detransition.
yeah,
Right,
exactly.
that's no different
Experience how
with
we
the
treat
trans
that
community, right?
In some ways, it's empowering because it feels like even though all this happened, you're being seen as an individual for almost the first time after, spending my high school years being lumped in by both the LGBT community and the rest of the people in a category. But it's also very isolating because you don't have really that community support that other places get.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. That was good. I like that. That was really that I was prepared for a little bit more contention, and not to say that there wasn't, but I think that was a really well balanced conversation for the most part. The thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.